I know what it's like to feel like an election was stolen, or that an election was rigged, or the election wasn't free and fair. I was in Mosul in January of 2005 when I witnessed firsthand a free and fair election. And I know it was free and fair because my platoon, my company, my battalion, my brigade did the work to make sure everybody had every piece of information, every bit of access to polling places, and then guarded them with live ammunition and the support of local soldiers and police officers. At the end of the day, a member of an insurgent group lobbed a grenade at my platoon. And without thinking, one of the Iraqi National Guardsmen jumped on this grenade. And it was not a full explosion, it was a dud of some kind, but I saw what somebody was willing to go to get a free and fair election. But put another way, I witnessed firsthand what a democracy was worth and is worth. I know what it's like to not feel heard, to have concerns and frustrations that no matter how much you speak up, you still don't get the grease, right? The squeaky wheel just gets ignored. A week ago, I discovered some information about Kamala Harris that I would want to know if I were another soldier or veteran, but which the systems that we have in place to make noise and spread information, those systems, those outlets, the Fourth Estate, the powers that be in journalism thought it's not that important. I'm in this unique position of sympathizing quite directly and genuinely with conservative people who have not felt like their concerns have been taken seriously. This election, I wouldn't say is rigged, but it's not fair. It's not free because we have a free press that takes for granted that maybe you get what you pay for, right? Everything's behind a paywall. I get it. All that is to say, I know our systems are broken. I know what it feels like to know that I should be at the table, but to feel like I've been squeezed out. If you feel that way, you're not alone. I feel some pretty strong feelings about the fact that we don't know enough about one of the candidates as a nation, and to know that there are people with power who are more invested in their idea of progressivism and their idea of democracy than they are of real democracy. Democracy includes people at the table that you don't want there. And if you're cutting people off of the political table, if you're cutting out their political power, that is not a democracy. I would like to think I'm prepared for either candidate winning. If one wins, the fight that I've been fighting for 8 years continues. If another wins, the fight becomes about democracy. I think we still have a democracy. I don't know if people with power hold the same understanding of democracy as I do. Democracy is radically inclusive. All the way back to Athens. If you have to use power to support bias, to support blind spots, to keep people out of the table or away from the table, despite the power that you have to give them access to that table, that's not democracy. And 48 hours will tell whether or not we as a nation did the work to make democracy something that the people with the most to lose are willing to let go of and see democracy work. I'm worried that the idea of democracy is going to be more valuable to people with power than real democracy. I thought I was progressive until I started being progressive for my community. And when I began applying my progressive values to my community, all of a sudden progressives didn't want to hear it. And so if that's democracy to some people, that's not what I understand democracy to be. I remember the last time Donald Trump was potentially going to be our president, I was on pilgrimage in France because I, like everybody, thought, he's not going to win. And then I was forced for the next week or so to figure out what it meant that I was on pilgrimage in Tours, France, to discover so much more about my patron saint, Martin of Tours. And one of the most important things I learned was how differently we've treated urban centers from rural areas. Urban centers have gotten a disproportionately high amount of resources, funding, human services, social services, and the rural areas have languished because we want to do the greatest good for the greatest number. Well, most of the people are in big cities. But notice in the Bible, Scripture reminds us that cities kind of become problems as well. Abraham is called out of the city. Martin, who grew up in the most opulent service in the military, the Praetorian Guard, he was called out of the Praetorian Guard, and he spent the rest of his life as an itinerant deacon and refused to get ordained the rest of his life because he had a problem with authority, or people would say he had a problem with authority. I'd say he had a problem with authoritarianism, but tomato, tomato. So I don't think that our election this year was as free and fair as it should have been. It wasn't as free as fair as the election that I helped directly support. And if they're not free, if we can't have an election that is fully free, transparent and accountable, and systems that are transparent and accountable, this is how we get this toxic populism that is very close to finding a second, term in office. So I know what it's like to feel like the system doesn't work, because the system doesn't work. It's just a matter of who sees it and how they bring attention to it. And I hope you'll help me bring attention to this.